There is no American politician, I think, understand Ethiopia better than John Garamendi. So I'm so happy you guys showed up here. And I want to give the floor to Agonafer, who's hosting this event. Then the congressman will make some remark, and Mesfin from APAC is going to make some remark. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. We actually expected more people, but because it's a weekdays and so on, but I know that they support Congressman Garamendi. I do need to recognize people who are involved in setting this thing. The host committee.
Step back just a little.
Like,
Be out of that.
yeah,
It's a speaker over here.
yeah,
Feedback.
I know.
There you go.
So,
There you go. Right there.
okay, oh, you got it. So the people who are involved in organizing this event, are Nabiyu Alamayo, the brother who just spoke. Alamu, Nabiyu Alam, I keep on confusing. Myself, Agonafer Shiferaw. Seleshi Taddese, most of you know. Mesfin Teganu is the president of the Ethiopian political PAC. He is a businessman, but he took the initiative to create a national political party that now is taking pretty much a leading role, pretty much a leadership role nationwide and globally, organizing Ethiopian. And now we're trying to figure out a way that our relationship with the African American community, because at the end of the day, we have the same cause. It's a symbiotic relationship that we have. The sooner we realize this, the better all of us would be. And then Nezanet Alamayo in Israel, who are allowing us to use their place here and the food that they have prepared. So we make sure that you enjoy the food that they have prepared. And Nezanet in Israel, he knows, Congressman Garamendi knows them a long time ago because he was their customer when they had Sheba restaurant in Berkeley. I mean, he was a frequent and all that, so they're not new to him. Dr. Qudus Yemam is also one of the sponsors, hosts. She's not here now, and Bahailu Asafa and Makwanant Mangiste is from Oakland area, and Hannah Tamrat and Adam Alam are also from Sacramento area that they were really involved in organizing this. I want to recognize some of our local political personalities and political leaders and church leaders. It is important for us because, as I said, a few of them who are a little bit late, they promised to come. I know that Reverend Brown was supposed to be here. Fred Jordan, the president of the African American Chamber of Commerce. Bishop King, leading the John Coltrane Church, is also one of the leaders. Reverend Arnold and Fraser, Reverend Frasers are also here. And and also Cedric is the president of the Black Leadership Forum in San Francisco. I just want to say a few things before I bring in Mesfin to make some remarks about this event. This event, for some of you, I'm sure the congressman knows, is, in case you don't know, is a serious matter for Ethiopia and Eritrea and the Horn of Africa. There is a misguided political direction that is being done, managed by the current administration. This misguided direction actually is going to cost us life. It's going to cost a lot of disaster in the community, in the nation, and it is absolutely inconsistent with the strategic interest of the United States nor the Horn of Africa. But there are personalities involved behind, and that's why we really need people like Congressman Garamendi and others to start to look into it. Beyond this crisis that's happening today in the last 2 years, with this new administration, with the Biden administration, behind the curtain, there is the national security apparatus that is completely corrupted. And they are feeding wrong information to the decision makers, both the legislative and to the executive body. The problem is, these personalities are compromised, in our opinion, materially. And they're affecting national global policies of the United States. The decision, the influence they have on national policies and international security issues today is a tremendous cost to human life. They are involving, the recent Ukraine crisis itself is a result of lack of insight into understanding global politics. They are involved in Africa, in the Horn of Africa, in Ethiopia, in Eritrea. There are a crisis in Libya. All this is a result of these characters. Some of them are previous and still officials in this National Security Council. We would like Congressman Garamendi to look to this within the context, within a framework of legal issues. This is a serious matter. Ambassador Susan Rice, Ambassador Linda Richardson, Secretary of State Blinken, who used to be Susan Rice's office assistant, whatever he was, but he's now a secretary, Gail Smith, Samantha Matters. These are people in the National Security Council apparatus that are pretty much creating havoc in the Horn of Africa. In the Horn of Africa today, the United States is losing power, influence to China and Russia, and it is primarily because of this misguided direction. So we are looking at leadership and support from people like Congressman Garamendi, and it needs to be communicated clearly to the Biden administration that this cannot continue. It's costing the world. We are in crisis in the world. I mean, the Third World War is emerging. So we have to look beyond the surface and decide what is the problem? Where is this coming from? Because in 2 years, the world is going through an unbelievable debacle. And for us, for Ethiopians and Eritreans, it's much more. So I'm sorry I took a little bit more, but I want to invite my friend Mesfin, who, as I said, has really created a national pack, which we want to expand into Ethiopian pack, which in the future we'll try to expand it to the African American community, because we need to work together on this. So Mesfin say a few remarks, and then the Congressman.
That was good.
Thank you, Agonafer. Thank you very much. Congressman Garamendi, I have a few things to say to you, so I have prepared a written remark.
Please do.
All right. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, the dearest Congressman, I'm delighted to be here this evening speaking on behalf of the American Ethiopians Public Affairs Committee, our more than 100,000 members across the United States, supporters and partners organizations across the country. First of all, I really would like to thank Agonafer, Nabi, Salashi, and all the organizers of this event. Thank you very much for making this opportunity for us to get closer and have a conversation with the Congressman. Our community is at its best when we are actively engaged in civic life and political processes. In less than 2 weeks, time, the country will go into the polls in an historic election. There are some profound issues on the ballot, from abortion to the economy to jobs. Right now, voters are mulling on what issues motivate them most to support a particular candidate or party. For the Ethiopian American community, one thing above all others will be weighing heavy on our minds. That is, whether my representative or candidate has supported the diaspora during our time of need. And of course, that is in reference to the war in the northern region of Ethiopia, Tigray, Afar, and Amhara. I think it's fair to say, Congressman Garamendi, you have been one of the most supportive members of Congress and offered a hand of friendship to the community and when we need it most. Your dedication to Ethiopia and the Ethiopian Americans, I'm sure, is rooted to your time serving in the Peace Corps in Ethiopia from 1996 to 1998, together with your wife, Patricia. I understand whilst there you learned the Amharic language and helped teach English as a second language. Living in Mattu, Ilbabur, you both integrated with the community and helped on a variety of community support projects. the list of things you achieved is impressive. Among them, helped build bridge and other infrastructures, set up school library, and rolled out smallpox immunization. I understand your children have also followed your footsteps and worked with the Peace Corps. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you and your family for your service. On your return to the United States, it wasn't long before you sought another way to support, to help. In 1974, you became member of the California State Assembly. In 1976, as a member of California Senate. In late 90s, you became member of the Bill Clinton administration, and later Insurance Commissioner of California and Lieutenant Governor of California. Finally, in 2009, you were elected to the House of U.S. Representatives and have served your districts with passion and dedication ever since. In today's polarized world, we forget the huge sacrifice people made to run for office and then serve. It demands a huge amount of time away from loved ones and brings with it relentless public scrutiny. We also recognize on the issue of Ethiopia that when you have stood up for the truth and fairness, you have faced a barrage of anger from those supporting the TPLF's efforts to divide Ethiopia and break its territorial integrity. They are a minority but a loud ones, and we thank you for standing firm. Your time in Congress has been filled with successes for your district and those people here in this room. You secured $86 million to improve and expand Interstate 80 and US Highway 50 corridors in Yolo and Sacramento counties. You secured $1 million for Adventist Wealth System, West Sutter, Yuba, and Lake counties. $400,000 to community care health centers in Davis, and $500,000 for Winter Cells Foundations. And thanks to your advocacy, the Prevention Rapid Response Institute at the University of California Davis Center received close to $1 million in funding to ensure healthcare workers and are prepared for the future pandemics. In Congress, you have helped secure many bills through the House. You have shown a real commitment to protecting our environment and supporting our army. You played key role in putting together the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And of course, you have done your utmost to support Ethiopia and diaspora community in the US. This brings me to my ask, and are just few of them. When you return to DC after your successful election, help us transform the US approach to Ethiopia and to a position of constructive partnership. The United States and Ethiopia had a proud century-long relationship and sustained many ups and downs. But since 2020, when the TPLF launched its attack, those relations have been strained and now close to the point of breaking. We all want peace, and Ethiopia is now entering the beginning of the end of the war. As you have tried to explain to your colleagues endlessly, the people of Ethiopia have no appetite for the TPLF to participate in Ethiopian political discourse in any form going forward. The war will get will soon get to conclusion, which will allow Ethiopian federal forces to quickly upscale aid to aid and restore services, something they have publicly committed to. The TPLF is desperate to portray this is a war on the Ethiopians living in Tigray. It's not true. It's a war to defend Ethiopia from TPLF violence and corruption. Ethiopia is on democratic journey. We need champions in Congress who understand the country, its history, the desire for a better future, to amplify the reality on the ground. Therefore, our ask to you to consider are the following. One is work with us and the representatives and other representatives to set up an active pro-Ethiopia caucus. And the second is introduce with colleagues a bill in the United States Congressional session to change the narrative on Ethiopia and end talks on sanctions and condemnation, and instead focus on trade, democratic values and respect. And three, lobby USTR to reinstate Ethiopia with AGOA, a decision due soon. And then the last one will be support the African Union peace talk on the TPLF and call on the TPLF to end its violence, lay down its arms, dissolve, and hold, and also hold the Ethiopian government to its commitment to rapidly upscale aid to all impacted areas and liberated places. As Americans, when the value and freedom we enjoy here being exported to Ethiopia, the Horn of Africa, and across the entire continent. But the United States can only do this if it views the African nations as partners. On a more general note, we are keen to elevate diaspora engagement with representatives. We believe diaspora communities held the key to transforming U.S. influence in Africa. We can offer in-depth knowledge of our respective ancestral homes. We can help booster support for the administrative policy positions here and abroad, and can help boost trade, and there are no better ambassadors for American democracy values than us. I hope we'll continue to work together in this endeavor in the future. Thank you for your support to our community to date. And I know you don't like it, you don't need it, but good luck on November 8th. Thank you.
I'm a second hour.
Just back up a little bit.
Back up a little bit. Watch that microphone. That's called feedback, and I'll find the appropriate location now. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate the introductions. Often the introduction is simply a review of where I have been, what I've done. This introduction is far more valuable. This introduction not only reviewed my own experience and Patty's experience in Ethiopia, but it also reviewed why Ethiopia is so critically important, and the concerns that you have, all of which I share. The concerns about the position of the Biden administration. The previous administration basically ignored Africa and and pulled out much of the American engagement. The Biden administration, I think, made some very serious errors. And those errors began, in my view, when they did not value
what we value or should value here in the United States, and that is democracy, the rule of law, and the value of an election. The fact is that one of the, perhaps the only, viable free election in Ethiopia's history was the election that brought Abiy into power. And then the subsequent troubles and the view of the American administration to really, in my view, favor an insurgency against that election was simply wrong. Reasons for it, some of that discussion before I had the microphone might explain it. There were relationships that were built over the previous 25 years, and those relationships seem to be more important than what we like to talk about here in the United States, which is democracy and the vote of the people to decide which way the country would go and who would be its leaders. I hope that we are past that. Come on in. The events over the last now 2 years, or nearly 2 full years, have been very, very difficult. I've often found that people that I've talked to that support the TPLF have been unwilling to recognize facts of assassinations of key military leaders in Addis Ababa, facts of a effort by the the TPLF simply overrunning a federal military base in the north, taking the weapons and then conducting an insurgency, a violent insurgency. I don't know of any war ever in which there has not been damage to non-combatants. And there's much discussion about who did what to whom and when. But one thing that is clear is that the war that was initiated by the TPLF clearly resulted in atrocities all across, at least northern Ethiopia, and some even in the south and west. We have to move beyond that. And it's been my goal throughout this entire process to bring to the American government, since that insurgency began in 2020, that first Abiy was elected in what was considered by most every observer to be a free and fair election in a country that had not had such a thing in the past. Secondly, that as a government, we should be supporting an elected government and continue to put forth our values. Third, we should be supporting humanitarian causes and humanitarian efforts. Very, very difficult to do in a war. And I have no illusions about those difficulties. And there's much to be said about, well, was the aid made available, yes or no? Could it have gotten to the people that needed it, yes or no? The facts are that aid assistance was made available, and it didn't always get to where it was needed. Debate for a long time why that happened. But the goal is to end the war and to bring Ethiopia back together again. I know you follow this more closely than I do, and we know that today was the second day of a negotiations in South Africa. I don't know the results yet, perhaps you do, but the word from the first day was that they're talking. Now how you put this back together is going to be a very complex and a very difficult very difficult to do, but it must be done. And as that takes place, or while that is taking place, it is becoming increasingly apparent that the federal government is very, very close to a significant victory in the North. We were talking a moment ago, my information is probably 12 or 20 hours out of date, but with the exception of McKelly, it appears as though most of the North has been now occupied by the federal government. If that is the case, and if that holds, then McKelly is almost certain to fall, and hopefully that'll be the end of the fighting. I would expect there to be some additional fighting in various communities, and probably what we might call, well, whatever we want to call it. It's a hopeful moment. In my discussions with the Ethiopian representatives in Washington, I've made it clear to them that the Abiy government needs to take certain steps to address humanitarian issues. And the debate goes back and forth, is it sufficient? As I look at it, it's an effort to address the humanitarian concerns, food, pharmaceuticals, and the like. As I said, very difficult to do this in a war zone. But it appeared to me, from the information that I had available to me, that the government was making a sincere effort to do that. A lot of that did not arrive where needed. Why? That's a factual issue that'll be discussed. But I do know that efforts were made by the Abiy government to deliver into the conflict zone food, pharmaceuticals, and other humanitarian needs. In some case, well, unfortunately, that was not recognized, certainly by the popular press. My view is CNN got this wrong from the outset and continues even to this day to get it wrong. Now, you have your information as to why that has happened. I don't want to go into that, but they were reporting one side of the story, in my view, in a slanted and inappropriate way, not at all balanced. Relationships go back a long way, and perhaps that has something to do with it. But here we are today. Our goal, my goal, is to bring about a return to a stable Ethiopia in which all of the various ethnic groups, economic interests, regional interests can come together and form a government that is selected by the voters of Ethiopia. That's where this should go. That's not going to be easily done. And this is, my view is that the government that was in power for 25 years, 27 years, made a very, very bad mistake. Perhaps on purpose, perhaps out of naivete, but they created ethnic divisions and created ethnic groups within Ethiopia, rather than trying to create, to reduce that ethnic the ethnic conflict that has been with Ethiopia for many, many centuries. That created a foundation for trouble. And it's playing out across the country in ways, as the government, if this war is to be settled, and in that, I would hope that going forward, that the long ethnic divisions be reduced, and that the country look to try to unify. Not going to be easily done, but to try to create a national unity and a national identity that could provide the solutions to the myriad of issues, from education to healthcare to economic issues and the like. But the ethnic divisions that have been in place, at least for the last 27 years, formal ethnic divisions, I think create a very difficult situation going forward. Now, my hope and my work is to direct as best I can the Congress of the United States, particularly the Foreign Affairs Committee, and some people on the Foreign Affairs Committee that are more familiar with the previous government, the Tigrayan government, and have relationships that date back perhaps years. I would hope that the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House and the Senate move towards a policy of supporting the duly elected government, would be Abiy and his government, and seek to assist Ethiopia in rebuilding all parts of Ethiopia in a way that would bring all the factions, ethnic groups, together to work together for the future of what is clearly one of two critical countries, or maybe three if you consider South Africa, countries in Africa. And this brings us to the issue of Africa itself. If Ethiopia falls apart, Eastern Africa is in for generations of trouble. If Ethiopia is able to be stabilized, be a unified country, deal with the ethnic issues, the cultural issues, the religious issues that are there, and go forward as a strong, vibrant element in the future of Africa, Eastern Africa will be far better positioned. The alternative is chaos and war and very serious humanitarian problems. On the western side, you've got to look to Nigeria and all that's going on there, and it's not going well at all. And of course from the south, South Africa. Those are the three major power structures, not taking into account the countries that border along the Mediterranean. It is possible that this could go either direction. The peace negotiations are absolutely critical. I don't know how that will turn out in terms of dealing with the reality of an insurgency taking on a duly elected government. That's going to have to take very wise and careful negotiations, certainly by the Abiy government, and the TPLF is going to have to try to figure out how they would work in that context. But it must be done. We will see. We're 2 days in. Hopefully the negotiations will go on and ultimately be successful. That should be our primary goal, and for me, I have a scheduled meeting next week with the ambassador, special envoy, as I had with the previous envoy and with the various diplomats, to try to urge them to support what I've been sharing with you. Now, with regard to the question of trade relations with the United States, the time is not good. The law requires the State Department to make a decision by, I believe, mid-December. So there's not much time to address the legal challenges that the law presents. Some of those I know are already being addressed. One of them is the peace negotiations. Secondly, the humanitarian aid, a ceasefire, which may occur as we understand whatever comes out of the current fighting. Those are two. There's two more that have slipped my mind right now. I've made it clear to the U.S. government and to the Ethiopian government that those 5 requirements, they're on paper. And the U.S. government, by law, has to take into account and assess the progress on those 5. As I say, the time frame makes this difficult. The fighting is not over. The peace negotiations are underway, and that's good. And humanitarian aid is being made available, but may or may not be able to be delivered because of the fighting. We'll see. Now, having said all of that, I'm way beyond the normal role of a congressman. I'm way into diplomacy, but this is not new for me. In 2000, when some almost 150,000 Ethiopians and Eritreans were killed in that war, I took a group of returned Peace Corps volunteers to Eritrea, met with President Isaias, and then to Addis, and met with the Prime Minister and his cabinet. In those discussions, first in Eritrea and then in Addis, the peace plan to end that war was put in place. Our team of 5 were able to talk to the leadership in a way that the U.S. government could not or would not. The result of that discussions back between these two governments was the peace plan that ended that war. Now, unfortunately, it took 20 years for it to be implemented. That's a whole other discussion why that didn't happen. But the Abiy government, right out of the box, implemented that peace agreement and probably set up the trouble that he then found about a year later. I'm going to continue to involve myself, and Patty will continue to involve herself. Our work never ends. We were there in 1966-68. I remember on the street of Addis, we were back after 6 months in Metu, street of Addis, trying to pick up some things that we needed back in Metu. I stepped out of a hardware store and bumped into a soldier that was carrying a rifle, and he pushed me aside, and I looked behind him, and it was Haile Selassie. I'm glad that he stopped me, otherwise it might have been a difficult situation because I would have run right into into Haile Selassie. So we've been at this a long time, and we love Ethiopia. We love Ethiopians. We find sorrow in the traumas that the country has had. The Great Famine in 1985, I just noticed that one of you, I don't know where you are back there. There you are over. We did a fundraiser at the Fairmont Hotel to raise money for famine relief. At that time we'd gone back, interestingly, to Alamata, which was then one of the centers of the famine relief effort. It's a journey for us. It's been a journey of great joy, a journey of sorrow from time to time, but it's a journey that we're not going to stop, neither Patty or I. And I know it's a journey for all of you also. You're here in America. You share your tears You share your expertise. You share your time on trying to make your home, your country, your birthright a better place. And in doing that, you also make America a better place. And all of you in your leadership, you are doing that. Your engagement in political activity speaks of the fundamental democracy that we have. You can engage. The Constitution guarantees your right to petition the government, and you're doing that. And I really appreciate your support. Thank you. And you join together with like-minded people and petition the government. I'll be back in Washington. I think my election will hopefully be successful. I have a new district that brings me back to the Bay Area, so I'll see many of you more often. I don't think the Sheba restaurant's still open in Berkeley, so that was some while ago, but there are others, and we enjoy our Ethiopian cuisine. Thank you so very, very much for all that you're doing for Ethiopia. And thank you for the support. I need one thing. The financial support is always helpful, but the one thing that I must have is information and knowledge. And so please, through time, whether it be this conflict or the next crisis, whatever it may be, or maybe it's one of your relatives here in the United States, or maybe back in Ethiopia or wherever. If I have knowledge, I might be able to do something. If I have no knowledge, then there's nothing I can do. So please continue doing what you've done, and that is to inform me. Inform me on international policy. If you want to talk about the war in Ukraine, we could do that too. Or you want to talk about nuclear weapons, we can go there. But whatever it is on your mind, share that and share that knowledge with me. And hopefully I'll be able to use that to some good. And Patty and I will, from the very first day we stepped into Ethiopia in the fall of 1966, Ethiopia and Ethiopians will be people that we know and love. Thank you so very, very much.